So Mark Zuckerberg during COVID actually won during the high peak of COVID, like during the nasty side of it, was competing for a jiu-jitsu competition, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and won gold medal. Now, there's a thing called the Mandela effect, in which the Mandela effect is not what conspiracy nuts think it is or whatever, but what it is, what causes it is like one of the cases been labeled as Mandela effect is uh, and these nutty conspiracy people think, oh, we've flipped to another dimension, and things are slightly different. No, what it actually is your brain's um, ability or default practice, habit of filling in the gaps. If something's a particular way, it's most likely all this other set of information fits it then, because that's what you've seen about. You know, you don't like surprises too much. When we get a surprise, it shocks the system, shocks our brains. You think, how could that be? Some people go, oh, Mandela effect, because they're ignorant and stupid. Other wiser people would go, oh, that was a bit ignorant of me. I need to open up my mind to different possibilities in the world. I should stop being so damn close-minded. That's a very different approach to these crazy nutters who claim to be open-minded and claim to be truthers, all kinds of things that they're not. So C3PO is one example of Mandela effect. C3PO is a robot from Star Wars. It's the golden man, the gold guy. Many people out there would know what character I'm talking about. And there's a picture of C3PO. I think it might be the left shin down to the foot. It's silver. But C3PO's gold all over. Could never have a silver shin down to the foot. You'd think, and the crazies went and said we shift it slightly, and these people are blaming CERN when it fires up. We shift slightly. CERN, the big hydrogen collider, and all this particle collider, um, which is stupid. Particles at such a small scale colliding happen all the time. In like you could look at stars as well. So much activity as well in a star that happens. The universe doesn't shift into another dimension all the time, and we remember the old dimension. If that was happening, we'd be like, I don't know, maybe like we're on a DMT trip all the time. Um, Regardless of that, we fill in the gaps. We see most scenes in Star Wars, the majority of them. The top torso of C3PO, you might see a bit of legs a little bit here and there. You see them walking across the desert at a distance with R2D2 and C3PO, and they're different scenes. But most of these scenes are not really that focused on a close up, where you see all, close range, of you see all of C3PO with his silver shin and foot. So you see most of him is gold, and the brain in here thinks, oh, C3PO is a golden plated, whatever, shiny robot man. We don't go and assume Well, we never seen his left bottom shin. What if that's a different color? Because that's too much information. That's pointless information. It's not relevant to information we've had over the years in scenes from Star Wars, old and new. And it's pointless set amount of energy to spend thinking it deliberately so, whereas a lot of energy is spent non-deliberately. So there's a lot of mind chatter. So we fill in the gaps and go, oh, C3PO is all completely golden then. We do this with people like Mark Zuckerberg. We think of Mark Zuckerberg as this physically, nerdy people, people who are like into programming, employ people who have hacked, because that happened some in the earliest days of Facebook. An individual hacked Facebook servers and made everyone's pages. It's probably like some JavaScript going in the back door for the like changing the style sheet for the pages. But everyone's pages end up looking like MySpace pages, which was MySpace and Facebook were kind of similarly popular on, both are equally popular at the time. And people would say, "Are you on Facebook?" No, I'm not. I prefer MySpace, whatever. But instead of giving this guy a slap on the wrist or banning him from a platform or whatever, Mark Zuckerberg and friends said, "How are you doing this? Do you want a job?" So these nerdy people, you don't think of them as combative in a mindset of people who what you think of as, "Oh, I'm going to tell you you shouldn't be doing this and that." We also fill in the gaps with that. We fill in the gaps with a traditional dominance would be, particularly from men. You think, oh, he's probably quite rogue. If I told you about somebody who's very stern and lays down the rules and doesn't want anyone to veer off like um expectation of their, like, he doesn't want anyone to be immoral or victimize anyone or anything like that, uh even slightly, because you could say people were victimized in the shock thing and they go onto Facebook and go, whoa, why does my page look like MySpace but on Facebook? What I'm saying is we fill in the gaps with that, and you think of those who are stern enough to lay down the rules more physically robust because we fill in the gaps. Even women who, you describe a woman to you who's very bottom. Like if I described, she's not, um, but she is slightly. um, my boss then has described to you. She follows the book overly so, but um, your first when you first meet them, you might think they're overly rule based, stern, this and that. Half the time it's because they're scared what other people might think about them. I know that now very much so. The head office has said you got to do this and got to do that, whereas a lot of what they're saying could be improvised our own way, and we have to improvise anyway because we don't have the space. That head office seem to think that all of our outlets, all the shops are exactly the same. No, they're not. Not every building's the same shape or size, so we can't fit things in. We get planograms for layouts and all that. But there's that, and then there's other things that, yeah, but head office said this and that, and time over, again and again, I've said we can't because of and finally, eventually it gets through. But your initial impression might be because you fill in the gaps of the stern and all that, but you initial impression of hearing about them, you might actually think that they're quite robust and mean like a maybe a butch woman is what the terms is like. But we don't think about that as nerdy super nerds, right? Do we? Yeah, the super nerd, socially inept, not socially adept, and just awkward. But certainly, Mark Zuckerberg does come across as very unemotional to the verging on being sociopathic. Now, I think I have some sociopath traits here and there that, yeah, I mean, I certainly do care quite a lot in certain contexts, but not so much in other areas where other people might. Um, Probably because I've been through some shit that might have shut down some of my. Is the brain protecting itself? And it shut down some of the things like I can be seen callous sometimes. It's not my intention though. One way I try to get around it is put myself in that other person's situation. Although I don't tend to, people would never realize that really they got to know me, but they may get to know me and then get to know a bit further over time. They may see some quirks here and there that you think, well, it's a bit mean, it's a bit callous. Uh, at the same time, I've had people praise me for my support of them as well. I look after my own, um, definitely, and regardless, enough about me. I think, basically, I think there's some of those traits. I know there's probably some of those traits in everyone. There's some narcissism in everyone, and so on. But when it starts tripping us up, we've got a problem. And I think the sociopathy side of Mark Zuckerberg trips him up, definitely. Because, look at the, uh, again, coding nerd and all this, the face recognition, they've agreed to take that off Facebook or Meta, supposedly. The tracking, for the whole system and algorithms and all that to work on Facebook, they never once, ever, ever, ever needed all that tracking. Never needed it, really. But it's creepy. If Mark Zuckerberg was a complete stranger, you didn't know who he was in the street, and all of his software was personified in part of his character, or everything that was Meta, Facebook, whatever, put that in him as an individual, and he'd be some creep that'd be walking up to you in the street. And just randomly, what's your job? Where do you, how long have you worked there? Where is it? Where do you work? What location? What's your date of birth? Um, how many friends and family have you got? Who are they? Where do they work? What's their location? And it'd be super creepy, right? And be following you around the street and would not go away, and just keep on asking these questions. Stalker, really? It's just creepy fucker. And Mark Zuckerberg is creepy, but you combine that creepiness with jiu-jitsu sport, which is a grueling sport, which during the nasty side of COVID, or 2021, 2020, something like that, he won gold medal in a jiu-jitsu competition, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Now, the worst thing that could probably happen, I guess, in a competition, it's the first competition that he did, and he won. And you're an animal. You're a beast if you win your first competition as well. Certainly, he's cold calculating. It seems. I think, or maybe that's Mandela effect filling in the gaps there because the way he comes across. Anyway, but he doesn't come across like a normal human being. We can all agree on that. But the Mandela effect, we fill in the gaps and think Mark Zuckerberg is just this. If there was a fight, it would be that, there was a fight between him and uh, Elon Musk, because we've had this bullshit, which I think is a publicity stunt, but a tiny thread of me thinks it's on. Maybe. Why do I think that a tiny bit? Because the world is increasingly absurd. We got climate problem denialists going, oh, it's not a problem yet. It's happening right now. Nobody's doing anything about it but arguing about it. And you need to do something about it now. The biggest polluter on the planet would be countries like China, who are burning more coal now than they ever were. The smog is a problem, all that, and people argue like, and use Mandela effect, argue like, well, they've had X amount of solar panels and all that. They must be doing a good thing. They fill in the gaps, and oh, China's really green. No, it's not. Do you know there's inspectors and regulation going to check out in China and what some of the Chinese regulation the authorities are doing and getting this paint, the spray along the roadside, these arid, dead areas, spraying them green. So from a distance, it looks like this lush growth. Really, one of the production capitals of the world is naturally going to be rife with pollution, and they don't care. They don't care at all. India, definitely another polluter. It's disgusting what they're doing. I think, was it Sweden and Denmark? Probably Sweden, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, a very low percentage of pollution, but truly, if it's not filling in the gaps, you just look at what they're actually doing, why they're doing it, and what the results are. Statistics are out there and so on. You don't get a stat coming out of China that hasn't been manipulated by propaganda and so on, and missing gaps which out of there. I mean, look at COVID and guarantee it did. I mean, that's not Mandela. It's not Mandela effect to say it clearly came out of the lab, because there's too many variables to point to that lab. It's got to the point where authorities who seem to be using a language that they're convinced of this now don't want to say it did because they don't want to upset things, maybe, or whatever. They seem to be too afraid. Is there a lot of angry people if they realise that 100%? I know it sounds absurd to some people that, oh, it came out of a lab. I didn't say, don't do the Mandela effect. Don't go and do an assumption and fill in the gaps that I apparently said, oh, it's man-made and created, came out of the lab. That's not what I said. See? We all do it to a little bit. But, again, this tiny bit of publicity stunt, I think, if it is publicity stunt, highly likely, but a tiny bit of me then thinks it could happen because the world is increasingly absurd. People are increasingly in a habit of denialism that anything's wrong because there's a lot going wrong that we don't have control over, and that feels bad and so on. What can we do as individuals, we think, and there's always something we can do in many situations more than we think we can, I think, regardless. We tend to think Mark Zuckerberg is if there was a fight, it would be go away, like this. He's a jiu-jitsu competition winner, gold medal during COVID as well. And I think, well, what the hell's going on? Contact sport during COVID. oh, they wore a mask and they had their hands clean. But I think um, that's just crazy. You're definitely at risk. Um, that's not going to eliminate risk at all. But one could argue about all the measures and the extremism before fighting, extremism of like getting, make sure you're COVID free and all that. But none of that's really been put out there in deep detail how they approached that. But what has been put out in good enough detail is Mark Zuckerberg is a jiu-jitsu gold medal champion of Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Now, the worst thing that could happen, perhaps, is you go to jiu-jitsu competition, you might pass out with pressure around the neck, and if you've seen jiu-jitsu, it's quite a brutal sport, really. And a martial art. He's purple belt. I think you get white, blue, purple. I don't know how many color codes there are. I know it's eh, don't know. There's a lot of celebrities getting involved in jiu-jitsu. I don't know why. Um, Tom Hardy, he practices jiu-jitsu. Russell Brand, of all people, and again, that's somebody I think that we fill in the gaps where we never imagined Russell Brand doing jiu-jitsu. I don't think so. We assume he's a particular way. But then, I don't really pay much attention to Russell Brand how he is now. They've seen some crazy stuff how he used to be, because it was crazy, and he's a reformed. Um, he's an ex-drug addict, so definitely he's gonna be focusing on self-improvement rather than self-destruction. Um, well, who else? There's a lot of celebrities doing this, and it's definitely a fitness sport. Will get you fitter than it will get you super fit in some ways, depending on how extreme you want to go with it. As for Elon Musk, and then again, this publicity stunt that seems to be a publicity stunt is like putting on Twitter about a cage a cage fight. And one of them, I don't know which one, said, "Oh, it's on, bring it on," kind of thing. And Elon Musk is slightly obese. He has quite a belly. If you look at more so now than some years ago, I mean that's how it happens. You get past a certain age, if you're still eating junk, you're gonna put on extra body fat that gets in the way of your body's efficiency to handle things like insulin and other things. Hormones will extra body fat in men will convert testosterone into estrogen, so you're not gonna how the musculature of a man is more superior generally to women in general by the default in the if you're talking in the context of biology. um but because testosterone's a good a anabolic steroid. In anabolic means building, so it helps us build more muscle. It helps us build other things. It's not Testosterone isn't just responsible for more muscle or just responsible for more hair, or thicker hair here and there. Um, Many things. It has affects the brain differently to how women, and estrogen affects the brain differently. There's estrogen and testosterone both present in men and women. But all these things, though, if you're extra body fat later in life. I mean, later in life, you to some degree, your testosterone is going to drop a bit anyway. And Mr. Musk is at the later end of that, and he's got extra body fat. And I don't think he's physically that healthy. In talks with him, occasionally you see him do this. And yeah, like he's got a, whether it's a shoulder ball joint or a joint problem here, or he's pushing a shoulder blade back, or just, or a combination of things, maybe a vertebrae problem. I don't know. But that kind of action represents the way he moves there. I think he's trying to get rid of some pain or click something back in there, and he's not healthy. He doesn't look that healthy anyway. He just, but who looks healthier, Zuckerberg or Musk? Zuckerberg. Uh, but we fill in the gaps, and both of them we think, oh, it's just going to be, go away. This like farming kind of fight. I hate you, I hate you. Kind of like a girly tradition, a girly fight, But then that's kind of filling in the gaps in itself, like a traditional thinking of how girls fight. Oh, it's in women fight, girls fight. When they mean it, it's freaking brutal. Um, because they know they're at risk, they have to try that much harder, because they know in general, you're at risk because you haven't got the physical robustness of two men fighting. It's more, the rules are there. There's rules, even if there's no rules. In either person knows a punch could really knock each other out, potentially, particularly between two very robust men. But there's underlying respect there. We don't want to get like that. And then things get heated or whatever, you try to draw the line before it gets to anything like that. But regardless, there's a huge amount of that. You fill in the gaps, and it's the Mandela effect. You see it with all kinds of things. There was something about, I want to look that up. What was it, Mickey Mouse? Or Disney, something like that. Let's have a look. No. Mickey Mouse. Mandela. It's got nothing to do with the Big Hadron Collider collided particles together. It's like, oh, we're in another dimension. That doesn't account for mass. At the tiniest, almost in unimaginary small scale, these particles are being collided together. And that's happening in the universe. Guaranteed the universe is too vast for it not to be happening somewhere else and all that. You don't. And the idea that narrow-minded, backward, stupid, ill-informed, primitive ideas like, oh, if they're doing that and I get confused about something, it must be because they put me into another dimension. They did it. They fired it up again. It does take a lot of energy to do this. But it's not flipping people through dimensions and they remember the old dimension. What's happening is you're assuming things are a particular way because you fill in the gaps, and then you go discover it's not that particular way, and the denialism, the cognitive dissonance of I could never be this wrong, therefore I was right, and this dimension is not the one I was in yesterday or a few months ago. That's pathetic. Just admit you were wrong. Really? Just admit you were wrong. Images, Mickey Mouse, Mandela effect. Let's have a look. There's images. Don't know. All. Looney Tunes. The way it was spelt. That's it. I'm gonna look for that. Is it Looney? Tunes. Let's see, Mandela. And there may have been another spelling, but it's all happening inside of this dimension, you know. Popularmechanics.com, the science behind the reality bending Mandela effect. Accept. If you remember when Monopoly, I was just reading this article, let's see if there's an answer in this. But again, going back to Zuckerberg and friends and Musk and friends, I don't think Musk would be prepared for a fight, and I don't think it would be, or if anyone's going to be of the weak flannel, it would be him. But Mr. Zuckerberg's a beast. But when we see him walking around and all, he's always a tracksuit and all this. Very upright when he walks. He's no slouch. He doesn't slouch in at all, even when he's sat. His neck's relatively quite thick. He's not a dweeb. He's not a weak. How we think of nerdy people. He's just not. But we fill in the gaps, and because we don't see all that or really hear too much about that, and we think, oh, he's one of these nerdy people that are like the stereotypical nerdy person. To be honest, there's nothing stereotypical about Mark Zuckerberg. You know, he's a freak. I mean, he is. It's so weird. He's not very natural in his social discourse. He's very disconnected. It's like a disjointed individual. You see him in front of Congress, and it's like you see somebody you might know and nod in acknowledgement, but it's very robotic. And you might smile, and it smiles not genuine. It's just, oh, smile now, turn it off. Very much like a robot. And it's no wonder some conspiracy nuts think he's not human, because he's very non-human in a typical way. Just all of these very financially successful people seem to have issues with that. And if there's reasons for that, I think, but I've talked about that before. But here we go. If you remember when Monopoly's Richie Uncle Pennybags wore a monocle, this is what I'm reading off the article, or when Curious George had a tail, or when Looney Tunes graced your TV set, you're wrong. We fill in the gaps. There we go. It's Looney Tunes, not Looney Tunes. Looney, Looney, and we think we because it's jokey, it's fun. You might think, oh, let's rhyme it or fill in the gaps. Looney Tunes. No, it's Tunes. Looney Tunes, not Looney Tunes. But we think of cartoon as well. We fill in the gaps. Because cartoon, CARTOON. Isn't that how you spell cartoon? I believe it is. Oop. I want to look at spelling in case I'm wrong. But if I'm right, it proves my cartoon. Yeah. CARTOON. Cartoon. is a type of art which is typically drawn, frequently animated cartoon. So we just filled in the gaps. This is what the Mandela effect is. Looney Tunes never existed. Looney Tunes is what existed. Pennybags had perfect vision. Curious George is as tailless as a guinea pig. And the show is correctly spelled Looney Tunes. But before you question your reality, you're not alone. People all over the world have the same misrecollection. This is why memory is not really that good. Every time we access it, we're filling in any gaps. Sometimes it's really good, depending on the context of what happened and so many other variables, right? It's called Mandela effect, and the term can be traced back to one person's inaccurate memory about Nelson Mandela. In the 1980s, a self-described paranormal researcher named Fiona Broome claimed that she remembered hearing about the death of Nelson Mandela, and the prominent South African anti-apartheid activist, while he was in prison. However, Mandela emerged from prison in 1990 and went on to become president of South Africa in 1994. Broome was the only person to remember, the only person. So something went wrong in your brain, not a trans-dimensional shift. The only person to remember Mandela's death, after hearing from other people who had similar recollection of Mandela's passing. Oh, sorry, he's not the only person. Broome created a website to recount her false memory and dubbed the occurrences the Mandela effect. Memories are unreliable for many reasons, but a contributing factor might be the complex arrangement of memory storage in our brains. We don't have a central memory storage unit. It's not like a SD card. It's a process of computing via past experience of how we expect things to go, like C3PO. Oh, he's gold. There's no reason why his shin should be silver. Because why would you do that? Well, I mean, you don't, if you're going to, it seems like intentionally it should have been gold. Or maybe they ran out of paint. I don't know. Different aspects of experience are stored in different parts of the brain, and they are linked together by a brain structure known as the hippocampus, says Daniel Schachter, PhD, a Harvard professor, psychologist, and author of The 7 Sins of Memory. The hippocampus resides in the temporal lobe. It's the metaphorical intersection of our brains, complex memory highway, and it stores our long-term memories. Metaphorical intersection of our brains, complex highway. One way to put it for sure is very complicated. Again, it's not like a memory card. Oh, if it was, it'd be great, right? To some degree. To retrieve a memory, we have to use different parts of our brains and different elements of an experience, says Schachter. Schachter, I think I'm pronouncing it right. This Harvard psychologist professor. Memories are psychological combinations of a visual perception, auditory perceptions, and emotional responses. They're not like photos They reflect our interpretations of our experiences and not literal recordings of what happened. Yeah, this is why people will forget what you said, what you did, but they probably never forget how you made them feel. It's very important that, and when you think of emotion as primitive, is it's probably one of the oldest parts of our makeup. Could be in some ways one of the most advanced as well. Depending on what context, how you look at it. Memories are complicated even more by the influence of stored knowledge and past associations. When our brains don't have all the information they need to relay a full memory, they fill out memory gaps. We assume, oh, it must be this way, it must be that way. And we don't consciously assume. We don't choose. It's just very sublime, very like at the threshold of the conscious of what's really going on. Unless you practice a lot of meditation, a lot of insight. I've done a comment recently underneath a video saying about hindsight is like 20/20 vision. Insight is always revealing, but it's just like infinitely revealing. If you've ever meditated, you understand that. And if you ever practice meditation regularly, you understand that. Our brains prefer to fill information gaps with inferences or assumptions rather than leave them vacant. Says Christopher Dwyer, PhD assistant lecturer and applied psychology at the Technology University of the Shannon, Midlands, Midwest in Ireland. This process is known as confabulation. It's rooted in ancient survival instincts that encourage our mind to play it safe at the small possibility of danger. Humans generally don't like uncertainty or confusion because it implies an unknown, and people fear the unknown. So much so, paranoid conspiracy theorists will allow fear to control them when they claim that you've got to see past the fear, all trying to make us afraid. They are always the very thing they claim not to be. They're not truthers. They don't have higher thinking. They're not super intelligent. But they use the denialism because the confusion and uncertainty is scary. I could never be that wrong, therefore I must have been right. No, you were wrong. Admit it and just deal with it and then move on. Try harder next time. Don't be such an idiot. Because the human brain clearly is not perfect. Nothing is. It does the best it can. It's a slave to what's happened to it over evolution. So is the brain, the body, everything that we are is a slave to that. We react, and our biology reacts in these ways that have been programmed into us via natural selection, right? The bias toward a complete picture of the past applies to the present as well. Internalizing new information passes through these same cognitive filters for many of the same survival motivated reasons. Dwyer says there's no guarantee that new information will be processed in a way that's complete or accurate. If new information contradicts something we already believe, we might twist the new information to make it fit the pattern we're familiar with seeing. I think most sensible, particularly critical thinking, analytical thinkers would go, that's surprising. I'd never expected that. I must have been wrong then. Why did I think that? How could I, and you start to question yourself. That's healthy. What's not healthy is to go to the extreme, get really paranoid that there's something wrong in your brain. It's just your brain doing its regular thing. By the way, deja vu, if you're having that here and there quite a bit, it's okay. You got a healthy brain. You're questioning, this isn't right. Perhaps I do a separate video. What's really going on with deja vu? You're not psychic. It's a brain trick, definitely. We're unreliable on our own, but others might be even worse. Our memories are vulnerable to external suggestion as well, says Elizabeth Loftus, PhD, distinguished professor at psychological science at the University of California, Irvine, who specializes in cognitive psychology, human memory, and psychology and law, being inclined to believe or act on an idea of others can be tied to many things: heightened emotions, low self-esteem, personal assertiveness, even age. But it can also depend on how much we trust the source of the idea. When when someone we trust, a family member, politician, or social media influencer spreads misinformation, it can lead to another kind of pseudo memory. False, not because our memories are inaccurate, but rather because the base information was never true in the first place. Yeah, putting people on a pedestal. They could never have been so wrong because they've been right about this and that and all these things that they're altruistic. Don't put people on a pedestal. You can't trust human nature. Who do you look up to then? You look up to yourself. How do you do that? Because you're at this position on your scale of improvement. Well, great if you recognize that, because that means you have the foundation to try and be a better person tomorrow or in the next moment. That's what you need to be looking up to. By all means, admire people who overcome their trials and tribulations. But you wouldn't want to be them, because if you was them, you'd have all their problems as well. Who might think, oh, I'd rather be this other person, who, if they were, you'd have all their problems as well. I mean, we all have our own inner demons and nuances and annoyances in life. But if we kept going on about them in detail, you become incredibly boring. It's like you go to work in the morning, you're right, yeah, fine, but you're not. But you don't want to bore people with going, and some people are actually like this. No, I'm not. I was to rush this morning. I don't feel right because I'm already exhausted before I go to work. I left everything too late, rush, didn't bring a lunch with me. And he's like, oh, shut the fuck up, you pussy. You're gonna think, God, you're insufferable. And it drains people's energy to bring the person's morale up. It's energy draining, right? If I go into work Monday, you're right. Yeah, fine, thanks. I mean, things could be better here and there. I've got some annoyances. I could go, well, yeah, financially not too bad, but I'm trying to save for this thing, and I thought I could afford it now. And they don't want to know all this bullshit. There's things, family issues here and there, and they're going to be like, ugh, could you go back home? You've just drained me. And don't do that to people. And we all lie a little bit, because a little white lie, yeah, fine, thanks. Because relatively you are okay. Relatively, because things could always be worse, right? You're just going to work. It's just routine. Nothing is perfect. This idea of perfection is in the world is what's stifling creativity right now. Misinformation creates a form of a form of collective false memories. Today, a mere 26% of Americans are very confident they can differentiate between fake news and reputable news. Very small. That's tiny percentage. It's awful. And the way your media is in America, how it's presented is convoluted anyway. Per the statistics and data companies, statistics, but they worded it different. Overall, media trust is poor in the United States, understandably, because of the bullshit way they go about it. Among 92,000 people surveyed in 46 different countries for a 2021 Reuters Institute report, Americans ranked last in media trust. Just 29% of surveyed Americans said they trusted the news. Overall, tiny percent. And I understand the mistrust, particularly things like NBC News and all these. You lose a lot of credibility when you have certain people on interviewed to support them when it's been demonstrably obvious that that person on should not be supported. Like the case of Amber Heard being interviewed by certain news outlets when it became demonstrably obvious that she doesn't deserve any limelight whatsoever. She should be forgotten about as fast as possible, not employed anywhere, and given mental therapy or something, because the woman is extremely poisonous, and her followers and supporters are extremely poisonous as well. While the only 44%, only 44% said they trusted news they use, a mistrust and misinformation spread. As mistrust and misinformation spread, the alternate realities of the Mandela effect seem more and more real. Huh. Yeah. Dumbed down society big time. And not a big paranoid conspiracy in that, but I just keep going back to William Casey's quote, which is, "We will know our misinformation program is complete, or disinformation program, whatever, is complete, when everything every American believes is false." Pretty much gone that way. Not every American, but the majority. You've pretty much gone that way. It seems or feels that way. But then, is it or not? I don't know. Maybe I'm filling in the gaps a bit too much. What I do see and know is happening 10, maybe more years ago, any American that came to visit the UK, holiday or business or whatever, they're dumb as hell. Really backwards, tiny world mentality. Now, the ones that come over, very world-minded, very intelligent. I learn things from them. And they learn things from me. And they're sick and tired of the dumbing down of America, the superficialness, the lack of factual information being valued. And they want to leave America as soon as they can. I've been saying it for decades. It feels like I've been saying it for decades. Maybe I haven't been saying it that long, but I've been saying it for years at least. Get out of America while you still can. Because I think there's going to be a point where you're not going to be allowed to leave. It's that absurd. Or if you're in a certain state, you won't be allowed to leave a certain state without paying an extortionate amount or something. Something weird like that's going to happen. And maybe I'll talk in a separate video why I think it's going to go that way. But then why would I spend all that extra energy doing so? Regardless, America is nowhere near, and never has been anywhere near, the so-called American dream. George Collins said you got to be asleep to believe it. He was correct. I'm going to read a bit more of this. As for the original Mandela effect, the most likely explanation for Fiona Broom's mistake is that she confused Mandela with Steve Biko, a different anti-apartheid activist imprisoned at the same time as Mandela, and had actually died in prison in 1977. Each instance of the Mandela effect, from Curious George tale to Uncle Pennybags monocle, might have an objective truth, but the psychological origins of each mix-up are specific to each individual. Do you remember the monocle because you assume older people have poor eyesight? Or do you conflate top hats with monocles? There we go. We fill in the gaps. Top hats with monocles. Perhaps if the Mandela effect created a glitch in your personal matrix, the takeaway might not be to question your reality. It might be to question your assumptions. But we see too much of that in today's world. Denialism. Oh, there's nothing wrong with me. It's everyone else. When everyone's telling you, no, you're wrong. Everyone's telling you. Get over yourself. You're not that special. You're not a truther. You're not a researcher. You're not super intelligent. And I've seen flat earthers go on. One flat earther, Jared. Is that his name? Can't remember. Jaranism. His username. Tweeting on Twitter that he gives full permission to Elon Musk to keep faking space. Like somehow he's deluded himself that he's that smart and intelligent, that everyone else is wrong, that he's now some kind of authority to tell people who have put things into space that he's like an authority over them. I give you permission, carry on. You're not going to be able to stop SpaceX doing what it does, journalism, you dumb fuck. But I think he knows that, but he's just on an ego trip here and pretending to be an authority on these things. He did an experiment that proved to him the Earth was curved. And the most intelligent thing he could come out with was, oh, interesting. And continued to move through the denialism thing because he cannot handle being somebody who admits they're wrong. It's everything. This reality is everyone else. It's all these different things. I mean, maybe he's probably even come up with that before. Like, I mean, any flat earther out there would be. They come out with all kinds of things. None of them, not one of them, can agree on a standard model of the Earth. Of course, because it's all wrong anyway. And if you, it's easy to imagine individuals. I guarantee there's going to be a flat earther out there that's the Earth. To say the Earth was a globe, but we shifted dimension because they fired up the big Hadron Collider. This is what a lot of Mandela effect believers think. The particle collider that's fired up, and every time they do it, we shift dimensions. Or some people shift into no dimension, and they were here. They came from the other one. Or things like that. No, you're just wrong. naturally wrong because you just filled in the gaps because past experience says about past experience is a particular way. You fill in the gaps that match more is more akin to a particular way. I wonder how many flat earthers the most density of flat earthers where they're from. Are they in a relatively flat area? Landmass? Do they live in mountainous ranges or whatever? Regardless, I live in a valley. I'm surrounded by mountains. Um, the SAS train on mountains, not that far from me. I guess we could get to those mountains. It's called the Brecon Beacons. There's extremely brutal training. When you're training for the SAS, you basically sign yourself up as a possibility of a death warrant. People die during that training. They want the best of the best, and you're agreeing to risk your life. Yeah, that's how it is. A SAS. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Take care. This is Jack's Analysis signing off. Stay awesome. And what do you think about Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg fighting, where part of this video is about? And we assume we fill in the gaps of what Mark Zuckerberg would be like in a cage fight. He's a jiu-jitsu champion. Thanks for watching. Take care. Stay awesome.